What is this? My husband returned home after a 2-week business trip, looking exhausted. He slowly took off his suit and threw it on the couch before heading to the bathroom. I couldn't just leave it there, so I hung his suit on a hanger to prevent it from wrinkling. That's when it happened. A piece of paper fell out of his pants pocket. I immediately sensed something was off as the paper had an unusual color. Upon inspection, it was indeed a completed divorce form.
I see. So that's how it is. I understand. I'll do as you wish.
A fire ignited in my heart at that moment. My name is Azalea, and at 30 years old, I'm currently juggling the roles of a homemaker and a working woman. Looking back, my 20s seemed to pass in the blink of an eye. Marriage, childbirth, and many pivotal moments in life happened during that time. It was a busy period, but there was no doubt it was filled with happiness. I'm grateful to have met my husband. Nowadays, when I'm not at home, I work as a cooking class instructor, and when I return, housework awaits me. Although it's hectic, I'm fulfilled because I get to do the work I love. My family consists of my husband Jet and our daughter Frances. We had a workplace romance, but since we spent a lot of time together, I believe we understood each other well. I've always admired my husband for his strong work ethic. Our daughter was born 3 years ago, and she started kindergarten last year. She's curious and quickly made friends, making mornings at kindergarten tear-free. Thanks to that, I've had more time to pursue my recent job. I must say, my cooking classes are quite popular, though I feel strange saying it myself. I've always been skilled in cooking, and my dedication to mastering everything from basic home-cooked meals to international cuisines has paid off. Recently, I've had more and more students, and my classes are always full. Initially, I taught twice a week, but now I'm teaching 4 times a week, which is just about right. It has indeed become busier, but I've made a firm decision not to slack off on housework or childcare. Family always comes first, and my husband and daughter are the most important to me. So far, I believe I've been managing both aspects of my life quite well. This self-confidence has given me a sense of fulfillment. However, it seems my husband has different thoughts. Even when I started the cooking classes, my husband gave his consent.
Okay, do whatever you want.
It was an indifferent response, but he seemed somewhat puzzled by the idea. My husband was what you might call a corporate elite, so we never had financial worries even if I didn't work. However, the future seemed uncertain in today's world. It never hurts to have some savings for the future. Plus, since I had some free time, I wanted to try something new. It seemed my feelings didn't quite get through to my husband.
Are you still running that cooking class? Are you dissatisfied with my income?
He even said that directly to me one day. My husband just couldn't understand me, as our finances were more than comfortable. I explained it to him many times because I really wanted my family, especially my husband, to understand. However, no matter how many times we talked, it seemed like my husband wasn't really listening. Our opinions remained at odds, and the status quo continued. The situation changed due to a trivial incident. It happened when I patiently set up a discussion with my husband and was listening to his thoughts.
You're my wife, so always look nice for me.
That was one of the things he told me when we first got married. Before I started working, even when there were no plans, I made an effort to look good, thinking I had to be a good wife. I even bought magazines every week so I wouldn't fall behind in fashion. But since I got busier, I only did the minimum with makeup, especially during the first year or 2 after our daughter was born. I was devoted to housework and taking care of our daughter, and I couldn't get enough sleep. Surely, fatigue and lack of sleep changed my appearance compared to before. It seemed that my husband was most unhappy about this.
I understand your feelings, but taking care of our child is also tough. Couldn't you understand a little?
My words led my husband to wear a displeased expression and fall into silence. Our opinions never seemed to align, and I couldn't help but sigh. Since then, it seemed that the distance between us and my husband had grown even further. Recently, even when my husband was at home, he wouldn't look at me. Just that made me feel down, but it seemed my husband had been accumulating stress as well.
It's marriage fraud, changing your appearance so much.
He even started hurling insults at me. One day, as usual, I was about to leave my daughter at kindergarten and head home.
Azalea, it's been a while, hasn't it?
The one who greeted me was my closest mom friend. We lived close by and had a family connection, so our friendship was quite strong. Since my job got busier, our interactions had been somewhat limited. Recently, we only occasionally exchanged messages online, so this meeting felt a bit nostalgic.
Good morning. Yeah, it has been a while. It's nice to chat like this again, haha. Totally, haha. Since we're here, how about grabbing some tea before heading home?
I agreed without hesitation, and we headed to a nearby cafe that was still quite empty.
So, how have you been lately?
At first, we exchanged casual updates about our lives, and the conversation flowed smoothly. It had been a while, so we both got excited talking about our kids. Having a friend I can talk to about parenting struggles is truly a blessing. I think I may have talked too much, though. For me, it's been a meaningful and enjoyable time. But the situation suddenly changed. The topic my mom friend brought up drastically shifted the atmosphere.
Hey, about last night, where were your husband and you?
I tilted my head, struggling to respond, because I was at home last night.
Why? What's wrong? You're asking some strange questions, haha.
I deflect her question with one of my own.
Well, actually.
After a moment of silence, my mom friend takes a sip of coffee and continues. She had plans with a friend last night, so she went to the station area. Since she arrived early, she waited at the agreed-upon location and saw my husband there. Because they are neighbors, she tried to say hello. But my husband smiled, waved, and walked away with a woman who appeared to be me, linking arms with her and disappearing somewhere. My husband was indeed near my mom friend, but the woman was a bit farther away, and resembled me from the back. Actually, last night, I had also found my husband's behavior somewhat strange. He came home unusually late, and what's more, he had a strong smell of alcohol on him, which was unusual because he hardly ever drinks. Maybe it was due to work-related reasons, so I tried to find a reason that made sense and resolve my doubts. However, according to my mom friend's story, my husband's actions do seem suspicious. After parting ways with my mom friend, I sent my husband a brief line message.
I want to talk about something, so please come home early today.
There was no choice but to confront him directly. I waited patiently for the evening to come with determination.
I'm home. Welcome back, come to the living room.
As soon as my husband returned home, we sat face to face in the living room. Our daughter was already put to bed, so I was prepared for a potentially lengthy discussion.
It's about what happened last night.
I relayed my mom friend's story to my husband just as she told it to me. Why did he come home so late? As I pressed him for answers, my husband became irritated and displayed a clearly unhappy attitude.
Why do you keep on about it? It was just a work gathering.
Finally, he raised his voice and responded only with outright denial. My husband shouted at me with such force that it echoed throughout the house.
There's no way there's nothing going on. Why were you out with another woman, arm in arm?
But I, not wanting to back down at this point, continued to question him. Our marital relationship had cooled down, that was true. However, I never thought my husband would be the kind of person to have an affair. I was truly shocked to have been betrayed. As we talked, sadness gradually overwhelmed me, and before I knew it, tears were streaming down my face.
What's wrong?
My daughter, rubbing her eyes, had woken up. Her gaze shifted between me, the one with tears, and my husband, whose face had turned red with anger. Daddy is being mean to Mommy. My daughter seemed to realize this instantly.
Don't bully Mom. I hate you, Daddy, for being mean to Mom. Don't come near me.
She hugged me tightly and burst into tears. My husband is distant with me, but he adores our daughter. I imagine her words must have been a significant shock. My husband stood there dumbfounded, his face frozen with shock. After that, I comforted my daughter and put her to bed together in our bedroom. When I returned to the living room, my husband was nowhere to be found. His agitation was anything but trivial, so I thought about trying to talk to him a bit, but there was little I could do. Since that day, my daughter started to dislike my husband. She completely ignored him, even when he tried to appease her. He turned away from her, unable to make eye contact, and it seemed my husband was deeply affected. 2 months after confronting my husband, the truth remained unresolved due to my daughter's unexpected intrusion. My husband, ultimately, didn't admit to anything, so I took matters into my own hands. 2 days after that night, I planted a listening device in my husband's bag and his private office. Upon reviewing the recordings, it was clear that my suspicions were correct. Not only was he having an affair, but the frequency of his meetings with the other woman had increased, possibly due to our daughter's feelings towards him. Through their conversations, I learned about the identity of the other woman. She was a colleague from his workplace and, surprisingly, 10 years younger than my husband. Recordings also revealed instances of them going to hotels during work hours and claiming business trips to travel using the company's expenses. However, audio evidence alone was weak. I tried to find more substantial proof, but my husband seemed to be very careful. One day, when my husband returned from a business trip, a significant moment unfolded. My husband immediately discarded his suit upon returning home. I attempted to hang it up on a hanger as it lay haphazardly on the sofa. At that moment, a piece of paper fell from the pants pocket. When I looked inside, it turned out to be a completed divorce document.
I see, that's how it is. I understand. I'll grant your wish.
In that instant, a fire ignited within me. Until now, I had intended to gather evidence to make my husband reflect on his actions. I wanted to hear him say, "I'm sorry, I won't do it again." However, it seemed like that would be too lenient. If he had the intention of divorcing me, there was no need for restraint. I resolved to corner my husband thoroughly. I retrieved the completed divorce papers and returned to my room. My husband seemed unaware of their disappearance. A few days later, my husband claimed to have another business trip and headed to work. However, this time, I had already confirmed through recordings that he was lying. This was a chance for me to act freely. I put my plan into action to seek revenge against my husband. 2 days later, my husband returned home as if nothing had happened. He probably felt something was amiss when he opened the front door. Since I hadn't turned on the lights in the living room, the entire house was pitch dark. He likely turned on the hallway lights immediately. Then, he proceeded to the living room and switched on the lights there. My husband was shocked and couldn't grasp what was happening. After all, there was nothing in the living room. The sofa, the TV, the shelves, all gone. He frantically checked the other rooms, but there was nothing. Everything in the house had disappeared, leaving it empty. Perplexed, my husband hurriedly called me.
Hey! What's going on? The house, everything's gone. Oh, what's the rush? As you wished, I divorced you. Huh?
My composed response seemed to completely halt my husband's thoughts.
I've already submitted the paperwork. If you can't believe it, please go to the government office and confirm it.
With that, I hung up the call. After that, my husband called me multiple times, but I ignored him. I had conveyed what I wanted to say, and there was nothing more to discuss. The next day, my husband apparently went to the city hall first thing in the morning. He wanted to confirm, but it seemed the divorce was indeed real. However, my husband, naturally, was not content and continued to call me. On the 5th call, I answered. It must have been a moment of relief for my husband.
It won't go anywhere like this, will it, the conversation?
According to my plan, my husband arrived at a certain location. It was the house where we had once lived, now an empty shell. When my husband entered the living room, both my parents and his parents were waiting there.
Why are our fathers here?
He couldn't hide his confusion at this unexpected visit. In contrast, I appeared composed. After all, I had been planning this since the moment I saw the completed divorce papers. Usually, it would be difficult for me to move around because of my daughter's drop-offs and pickups and my work. So, I explained the situation to my parents and they agreed to help me. I also announced a few days off from my cooking class. I began tailing my husband, capturing solid evidence of his affair on video and audio recordings. Afterward, I brought the footage, audio, and the divorce papers to our parents' houses. They learned of my husband's infidelity and, after receiving an apology, agreed to assist me. We also arranged for a moving company to transport our furniture and appliances, all while my husband was absent.
How about this? Are you satisfied now?
After sharing all the details, my husband had no choice but to give up. He admitted to the affair but, as expected, didn't openly apologize.
Absolutely, some of the blame of my affair falls on you too. You've stopped looking attractive.
Using what he thought were advantages, my husband desperately argued against it.
And taking everything from the house. There's no need to go that far, is there?
My husband, thinking that this was advantageous for him, desperately countered.
What are you talking about? After saying such things.
Furious, my father-in-law operated a computer that was on the floor, playing back a recording.
Let's get rid of the wife and finally be together, haha. We don't need any of the poor-looking furniture in the house. Can someone take care of the wife?
The conversation between my husband and his affair partner was heard. Even my husband had an uncomfortable expression, biting his lip.
You're the one saying you don't need her. You don't have any complaints, do you?
Even after the audio ended, my father-in-law's anger didn't subside. Understandably so, since they were the ones who had provided this furniture. Feeling insulted to that extent, my father-in-law, even though he couldn't oppose his son directly, delivered a stern lecture that resonated throughout the living room. My husband remained silent, unable to argue back. After a while, when my father-in-law's exhaustion was visible, my husband glared at me.
You think you can raise our daughter on your income alone if we divorce?
Even though he couldn't oppose my father, he still maintained a defiant attitude towards me. Faced with his continued obstinacy, I let out a deep sigh.
Will this prove it?
I handed my husband the bank passbook I had prepared and showed him the contents.
Why is there so much?
My husband was shocked when he saw what was inside. In fact, I had an income that was several times greater than my husband's. Alongside my cooking classes, I also published cookbooks to serve as references for others. Of course, initially, they didn't sell well, but they gained popularity through word of mouth. Now they're bestsellers and highly regarded books. Apart from my cooking classes, I had other sources of income, and before I knew it, I was earning more than my husband. This seemed to shatter my husband's pride, as he was quite proud of his high income. Certainly, my husband covered our living expenses, so I'm grateful for being able to use the money I earned for myself, my daughter, and savings. At this point, my husband had nothing more to say, and he just looked bewildered.
Well then, shall we go?
My parents and I, who had nothing more to discuss, left the house, leaving my husband behind. Afterward, I never met my ex-husband again. I moved relatively close by, but that empty house was unlivable. It seems he tried to return to his parents' home, but they firmly refused, resulting in disownment. With nowhere to go, he had to start his life over from finding a new home. Furthermore, my husband lost his job. Truthfully, I anonymously sent the recorded data from his company and photos of his affair. It included going to a hotel during work hours and misusing expenses. This information reached the higher-ups, and they were furious. Naturally, he was fired. His affair partner faced similar consequences. Being fired made his affair partner furious, and it seems they had a heated argument and parted ways. He lost everything, his job, his family, and his home, and is probably wandering alone. I heard about his current situation through mutual acquaintances, but I don't need to know more. It's no longer my concern. Lies and secrets bring unhappiness to everything and inevitably come back to haunt oneself. Reflecting on it again, it became an event where I could fully feel that. Starting from this spring, my daughter will also be in elementary school. She has grown into a genuinely good, honest, and kind child. I want to impart this experience to her in her life. I want to ensure that her life doesn't follow a path of unhappiness for herself and others. That's my deepest wish, and I'm determined to raise her accordingly.